Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Nicolai Leski. He is a classicist, an Oxford-trained classicist. He was an investment banker. He worked with Metzler, Germany's flagship bank, or one of Germany's flagship banks. And he is an investor with an astute sense of markets and more. Just so you know, he began ESG investing at Metzler. He also came out with the tax-free gold bond in Germany. So we are speaking to someone with great knowledge, fantastic initiative, and dare I say, much wisdom. Welcome, Nicolai.
Thank you, Atul. Thank you for the introduction. I'm not sure about the wisdom, but I'll try what I can.
Yeah, no pressure, Nicolai, yes. No pressure. Okay. Today we are discussing why Germany saves and why Germans love bonds. Germany consistently has one of the highest personal savings rates in the developed world, whilst average eurozone households save around 15% of their disposable income. Germans save around 24%. That's 9% more. That's a pretty big number. So my question is a very simple one. Why?
Well, with all honesty, I'd probably have to say, I don't know.
Well, we can stop the interview and we can just go home.
No, it really makes no sense whatsoever, I have to say. And I think for Germans, you must make a big distinction between saving and investing. And saving here is the classical thrift saving, savings account, building loan contract, something that is maybe even unheard of outside Germany and Austria, or the German-speaking world. It seems like the Germans can't step up their game as far as investing in equities goes, or in substance, in hard assets goes. There's always been a tendency, at least in this century and beyond, to hoard pure money and liquidity and not to let it work for you in a meaningful way, I feel. So, we need to define saving, and this is just plain liquidity saving.
Let me stop you just a minute. But they do save, unlike some other parts of the world where, let's say, you have a household. I live in America now. I'm in Washington, D.C. I've lived in California. A lot of people are weighed under credit card debt. And this is all the way from students to entrepreneurs, the whole spectrum. A lot of people are weighed by student debt. A lot of people are weighed by mortgages. So if you look at the indebtedness, both of the household and indeed of America, $39.5 trillion, it's a very different culture to Germany, wherein people hate debt. People want to save. People want to keep, money in the bank. And I mean, you are in Germany, and thanks to you, I know Germany a little bit, and thanks to other German friends. And this saving culture is tremendous. It is almost Asian, dare I say. So it's similar to, say, the Chinese, who also save money.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned the you're in the United States, and that's quite the opposite end of the spectrum, where the opposites are not saving or not saving. It's more there's a lot of spending, big spending culture in the US compared to the old world, where not only saving but also hoarding, saving stuff, holding on to old objects for a long time and handing them down in the family as well. you can find objects in many European households that are 300 years old, and but that's going too far. The problem in Germany is, I think, is historic and has very similarities to other countries like, say, France or maybe Spain or Italy in some aspects, and it's completely different from other countries like the Netherlands and the UK and the US as the strongest examples, I dare say.
Mm-hmm. So you're making a distinction, if we can go back to our Oxford days, you're making a distinction between the Atlantic economies that depended on free trade, the Dutch and the British, and the continental economies, which always were more mercantilist, which is, they always wanted exports to be greater than imports. They always wanted to invest in industry. They always wanted to keep a balance of payment surplus. And there was always this, especially in the Protestant world after Martin Luther 1517, there was this belief that saving was a virtue, what you Germans call Sparsamkeit, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes. Well, people tend to go back to the German hyperinflation of 1923, which is very contradictory, by the way, because inflation is something that should forbid Sparsamkeit, as you call it, being saving
the moral
money,
virtue, saving being a moral virtue, because if you're saving money in hyperinflation, that money is worthless anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the whole European continent, there's a pervasive culture of living on a continent with many countries and on a very small land area over a long time with lots of wars, but we had to kind of get along with each other. So that also is part of the game, I think. But there's more to it. I mean, I think we have to talk about colonialism here. That's very important, and we have to talk about the political systems. So if you look at Spain, for example, the Spanish had the what was it called, the Casa de Contratación. They had a specific colonial institution that oversaw colonial activities. They would make sure that all the colonized land would be entered into a book, and the trade was supervised by them, and all the trade of a fifth of the quinto real went to the Spanish crown. So that of course forbade any entrepreneurial spirit. So you have similarities in France. I mean, their colonial enterprises were maybe a bit less than the Spanish and others, but it was there. But it's also centralized. There was a monarch. There was the Sun King. It was all a very centralized government and regime. And why would you develop entrepreneurial spirit under these circumstances?
I mean, right? Even Jean-Baptiste Colbert, you're referring to the Sun King Louis XIV, under Jean-Baptiste Colbert, he of course was far-sighted. He wanted to grow trees for the navy, etc., etc. Yes. But the model was dirigiste, and even when France became a republic, even when France became an empire under Napoleon Bonaparte, they couldn't shake away that DNA of dirigism, wherein Paris dominates and controls the economy. And even today, the share of the government or the state in the GDP is over 50%. It was at one point 56. It's probably come down to 53, 54%. I'd have to check numbers. But that is clearly not an entrepreneurial free market economy.
Yes. I mean, one more point I would like to make before we cross over to to Germany, and then the other side of another class of countries, so to speak. I mean, we all know the Medicis and the Fuggers in Germany. They were big financiers of the monarchs, right? Yes. So there already you had powerful families with later on powerful banks funding monarchs being indebted, monarchs wanting to uphold the possibility to take credit, and that also was, that got ingrained into the system and into the mentality and the culture, of course. And that was part of why banks came about. And now when we look at Germany, I mean, we can talk about the Holy Roman Empire. Roman Empire of German nation, as we call it, as an addendum, we call it in Germany.
Which as a historian, which as a historian joked, was neither holy nor Roman.
Exactly. I mean, we all know it. It wasn't a German empire, and it wasn't one empire. It was everything else but an empire.
It was a loose confederation of many principalities, kingdoms, assorted states, under the nominal leadership of the Habsburgs. Would that be fair?
More or less, yes. But in what we now call Germany, that was a conglomerate of many little, not even kingdoms. There were counts and dukes and barons, and everyone had their own currency and their own toll and their own road systems and bridge, and you had to pay different fees. So what happened? Like someone like my former employer, the Metzler Bank, they arose from a cloth and spice trader. And when you trade spices, which you buy from outside, because Germany is essentially landlocked, you bring it from the southeastern most corner into Frankfurt, and you have to pay tolls and you have to exchange money at every station. And with that knowledge, of course, many banks many traders essentially became banks because they realized that there was more money to be made from all those exchanges and proceedings rather than from the actual risk-prone trade.
Rather than the trade in physical commodities, it was better to be a banker, exchange money, because you had figured the system out.
Yes, exactly. So, of course, when entrepreneurship came about, or when it comes about, when someone has an idea, when someone wants to expand, or they set up shop in Europe, you already had banks, and people would go to banks and ask for credit, and you had a local bank, and they would know the ins and outs of the currencies, the trade, they even had very early risk models, and so you would be able to go to a bank, whereas in the United States 400 years ago you couldn't go to a bank, but you had to ask people to give you money, because these people didn't have local risk assessment structures or anything like that. No local knowledge, no knowledge of the industry. They would say, I give you my money, but I want a share in your company. And that's why traditionally you have more equity owner protection in places such as the United States, whereas you have more of a creditor protection in the German, for example, the German or the French trade law codices.
Very quickly, I would say that it goes back even before America. After all, the first joint stock company in the world is the Dutch East India Company. And whilst Prince Henry the Navigator is commissioning voyages that go all the way to Africa, and then the Portuguese commission a voyage that comes all the way to India. After all, I was born in Vasco da Gama, and the Spaniards, 1492, they have a Genoese sailor sail all the way and discover America, although he doesn't realize it until he dies. Poor old Christopher thought he'd discovered India. He didn't find many spices, though, poor chap. But the point is that there it was monarchs commissioning these voyages. The Dutch have shareholders, and it is everyone from the rich merchant to their servants buying shares, some buying more, some buying less. So, and you take that model across the channel, and it's the same in England. And of course, Scotland, by this time, or not by this time, soon will have Adam Smith. And so all across the British Isles, except for Ireland, which remains Catholic, there is this fervor of capitalism, of shareholder capitalism, wherein risk and reward are correlated. And you have the British East India Company, you have other companies, you have the Hudson Bay Company, you have all these companies which are hugely risky operations, but they are going out with this idea that, look, if we win, to use baseball parlance, since I'm sitting in America, we strike a home run. And so that is completely different to the German model, because in Germany, you do not have this exponential upside model. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Well, I mean, the Dutch are just a wonderful example because they were the first, and they had to shake off the Spanish during the 80-year war.
Correct.
And when they finally shook off the Spanish, and by the way, during the fight against the Spanish supremacy, they had to organize their finances within the republic themselves. Well, it wasn't a republic by then yet, but after a while, when it was the Republic of the Netherlands, they were already used to organizing themselves among the citizenship, and because the Netherlands are a small country, they had to allow everyone in because everyone was welcome, and lots of so they had religious freedom. Lots of Jews fled to the Netherlands, and they were welcomed with open arms to partake in the economic activities, because they knew that they were great financiers by the time, and then everyone chipped in, and the wealth, it's incredible how even a butcher and a baker and the farmer, they would have shares, not big time, but they had shares in the VOC, and I think this. It's incredible how sticky culture like that is.
VOC is the Dutch East India Company, which basically upended the Portuguese control of the spice trade. And there was a time they had virtual monopoly over things like nutmeg and whatnot. And of course, it was brutal outside the Netherlands. They were absolutely brutal. But what it introduced into the Netherlands was this shareholder model, which was different to the Portuguese and Spanish model. And the British also had the same model.
Yes, the British had the same model. You may ask now why the British had a monarchy as well, but it was a parliamentary monarchy, and it came about very early. And the big distinction between England and, say, the Spanish or the French crown was that the English king wasn't allowed to meddle with state and tax affairs.
Yeah, but I must stop you there. I must stop you there because, yes, the British had a monarchy, but the British were the first to chop off the head of the king. Charles I lost his head before, well over a century before.
1649, I think it was.
1649, you're spot on. And, Louis XVI will lose his head, about 140 odd years later. So
Yes.
the British experimented with a dictatorship of Oliver Cromwell, who led to the deaths. If he didn't directly kill, his actions, he killed a lot, and many others died because of his brutality. 20% of Ireland died, and Britain went through that period, and then Britain got back the monarchy, and then Britain got rid of that monarchy, and they had the Glorious Revolution 1688. And 1689, exactly 100 years before the French Revolution, they have the Bill of Rights. Yeah. And that gave Britain the stability which continues till today. But Britain, you're absolutely right, was a monarchy, but it wasn't an absolutist monarchy. 100 years before France, Britain had moved on. The monarchy was largely ceremonial and could not and did not interfere in taxation and economics.
Yes. But the exclusion of the king from capital markets in the UK gave way to financial markets, to thriving financial markets, way before other places that didn't have it until the modern times, right? But I think we should leave. Maybe one addition. Of course, Dutch and English traders and explorers brought that to the United States, and that's why you have the Axis, the Netherlands, the UK, the United States, and of course Australia for obvious historical reasons, where you have more disclosure rights or more disclosure obligations, where you have less meddling of creditors, you have less orientation on the state tax side, whereas you have exactly the opposite in Germany and in France and in Spain and in Italy, where the banks are the insiders by means of financing companies, and therefore that you have less disclosure obligations, and you have more alignment with the local tax structure. The balance sheet has to be orientated around the tax, and that makes a big difference. And yes, that's where we are today.
So we can't. Please finish your point. Apologies.
Yes, but this is a new point, but the German, you can't have saving without the yearning, the need for security, for what can you say? You need security, and sorry, I'm lost for the right term for it. It'll come back, but
what you're saying is that Germans are risk averse. There's a higher risk aversion in Germany, and there's this need for security, and therefore credit, giving loans or buying in bonds is preferred over, or they prefer buying bonds more than buying shares. You also mentioned Deutsche Telekom. How that unfortunate timing of the IPO influenced German attitudes to the stock market. So those of us who don't know details about that incident, educate us. What happened? And why did it leave such a big impact on the German psyche?
Well, we're all well acquainted with the dot-com bubble that went bust in the early 2000s. And of course, Deutsche Telekom was in the hand of the state, and the German state wanted to collect money by making it go public.
So just like they were following the British experiment, what Maggie Thatcher had done with British BA, British Airways, and British Telecom, and yada yada. So the Germans said, we'll do the same. Yeah.
And there's basically, from my point of view, there's nothing wrong with it. It just came at the perfectly wrong time for the German population and the German saving thrift heart. Because the Deutsche Telekom was, as they say, the tide lifts every boat. Deutsche Telekom went up with the stock market and the dot-com bubble, and there was substance, there was hard asset knowledge, IP behind it. But it was pushed so hard that eventually it reached a price of 200 Deutschmarks, or was it euros by then already? And then it collapsed and stayed down at, between 5 and 10 euros forever. And many German citizens, it was, there were ads on television, ads in the radio, reads on facades, invest in your Deutsche Telekom. And people lost a lot of money. And lots of people who thought, well, this is a state company, this must be secure. We all have telecom contracts, all the lines, the wires, they're in our houses, they're in our streets, we can see the infrastructure. Of course we invest in Deutsche Telekom, but they had no idea about investing because it is not taught in schools. There is no tradition, there's no experience, and all that met with a catastrophical decline in the stock market, in the stock price afterwards. So people sold their shares with more than 90% loss, and vowed never to touch stocks again. And
so it's interesting you should mention that, but let's go to the 2007-2008 great financial crisis, GFC. I was working in the City of London then. We used to meet regularly in those days. And yes. German banks burnt their fingers really badly. They thought, in the words of one of our friends who was working in an investment bank, the Germans thought they were buying gold. Instead, they bought dog shit. And so the German experience, even in the credit market, is not so great. So why weren't people as traumatized by the 2007-2008 great financial crisis? Was it because they were removed, because it was the banks who were doing it and the banks were bailed out? And so the individual German never felt, the trauma, because yes, Deutsche Telekom didn't work out, but less than a decade later, investing in all these, credit market assets didn't work out either. Yeah.
Well, I don't think the subprime crisis of 2007, 2008 and the following Euro crisis after that was really a problem of the German saver. I mean, there was a stint where the German saving man on the street, so to say, had his little moment, was when the interest rate was at around, I might be wrong, let's say around 3%. And then Iceland's banks ads offering 7 or 8% on savings accounts.
I remember those days.
Yes, it was incredible. There's always a reason why the interest is where it is. And lots of German savers went to Iceland, to the Iceland banks, and said, shut up and take my money. 7% is better than 3%, not even considering why it is 7% and not 3%. And of course, these banks went bankrupt and they lost their money. And then the German government made a big mistake because they all held up their hands and said, Miss Merkel, please, we lost our money, this is a scam, help us. And she said, your savings are safe. Which, in my view, I mean, when you invest, even if you save money and you put it in an account, it is still a form of investing. And when you invest, you take a risk. When you take a risk, you have to know what it is and which risk it is. And if you don't take an interest, you should pay your price. But people didn't have to pay a price for it.
So let me stop you. I'm not just talking about people, because indirectly, because Germany has such a high savings rates, saving rate, and because German banks were flush with cash, German banks displayed the same attitude to investing as the German people. They did not buy stocks. They bought they bought bonds, really, or a form of bonds. They bought all these all these different derivatives which were based on bonds. And quite often, a lot of them were subprime mortgages bundled together, called CDOs. And I mean, we can go through the terminology. That doesn't matter. But German banks were buying these worthless credit instruments. And then they were in trouble as well. It wasn't just the Iceland banks. It was the German banks as well. And Germans did provide a lot of the liquidity for the American bubble.
Yes. Well, I can't be very scientific about this. All I can say is that, there's the term stupid German money.
Yes, I've heard it from you and many others. I've also heard the term stupid Japanese money, by the way, from my Japanese friends.
Yes, I can imagine that. And I don't mean it in any derogatory way. I think the Germans I think that is part of the savings culture, where you think if you give someone money, you get it back. But what happened in the subprime crisis is it was all cheating. It was all nonsense. It was all nonsense. And I mean, not only German institutions burned their hands or got their hands burned. It was all over. It was all over the place. But in Germany, it was
the extent was higher. The extent was higher.
Exactly. I was just going to say that the extent was a lot higher. And I think it's the relying on the promise that you get your money back plus more or less return, right? And no one took an interest in understanding the way subprime worked and the way all these CDOs, all those derivatives worked. Collateralized debt obligations, where you shift risk and returns here, hither and thither, and you end up with many different products in the end. And I always compared it to a table. When you cut off one leg, the table is still standing on three legs. But what happened with the subprime crisis is that the whole housing market collapsed, and that pulled the carpet out underneath the table and made even a table with four legs topple. That was the big problem. And Germans weren't used to these big markets. The shoes were too big. Let me just put it this way.
So let's take the conversation back to the role of culture. The German word for debt, Schulden, has the same root as guilt or blame, Schuld.
Yes. Yeah.
And language tells us a lot. In South Asia, for instance, the movement from Khuda Hafiz to Allah Hafiz is a very good indicator of the radicalization of the individual, or not even conscious, subconscious, or maybe not radicalization, but certainly the drift towards a more Arabized form of Islam. And language tells us in so many, and you're a classicist, I don't need to tell you that. Does this have a major impact on the German mindset, whether it is the German household that saves more, the average German individual, or it is the German bank that wants to buy credit, wants to buy bonds instead of shares or stocks?
I think this is a long shot, because you're right. Schulden also means guilt and blame, and is very tied to the word debt in German. And when you hear Schulden, especially in the plural, you think more of debt rather than guilt. So it's more the singular. So I think in the etymology, yes, there is maybe some subliminal message, but I don't think it has anything to do with the savings culture. I mean, I was informed. I don't speak Dutch, even though my wife is Dutch, as you well know, half Dutch. But I was informed that it's the same in Dutch. Actually, it's very similar.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
but you have a completely different mindset, the opposite mindset.
Okay.
Right?
So
I mean, actually, I mean, you were saying that the German savings rate is 24%. I think it's actually a little lower. 24 was during the Corona crisis.
Okay.
It's the studies, the German statistical office, they start saying something between 10%. Others say 20%, but I think it's more towards 20%. But the Dutch actually, they have the highest equity proportion in their portfolios and in their pension schemes compared to any other countries. The Scandinavians.
Any other country in Europe? Any other country in Europe, I presume. Yeah.
Yes.
And the same for Scandinavians, you said.
Yes, Scandinavians are very high up there as well.
Yeah.
But the Germans are terrible. The Germans have, I think, there's 10% of Germans have actual equity owners, active equity owners, and it's creeping up towards 20. Well, it's actually crept up towards 20%. Especially during Corona and the whole, the Trade Republic app and the gamification of investing and, new generations shaking off the old culture. But it's without it. I don't think there's much of education behind the actual investing. I think that's more the gamification of investing.
Okay. Now, there's one more thing. We talked about the savings rate, and you said that Germans don't only 10 to 20% of them own stocks. Germans also don't own houses. In America, everyone tries to buy a house. I mean,
yes.
Of course, that number is declining now because property prices are so high. So it's the same as the case in the UK. When I began work, people would say rent is waste of money if you're paying rent. You won't own your house at the end of it. So it's money down the drain. There were older people telling me all the time, the first thing you need to do, young man, is put aside money for a deposit, buy your own place, and then pay a mortgage, because paying a mortgage is useful because you'll own the house at the end. So it was very interesting coming from India, where I didn't grow up. I grew up in a socialist country. I didn't grow up with this idea that you put your money down and get a mortgage, because in India we didn't have developed credit markets. You had to plonk the whole money down in one go. And then, of course, discovering Germany, where unlike in the UK, most people were renting. So my question, after such a long perambulation, is the reason the saving rate so high because Germans are not paying mortgages?
That's a good question. I think it's two different things. On the one hand, you see, there's a for any German listening to this, there's the German saying, southwestern German saying, spare, spare, Häusle baue.
So you mean Baden-Württemberg's?
Yes, Baden-Württemberg. Yes.
Okay.
They're well known for being very zealous, conscientious, and big savers. But the thing is, it means.
Could you translate that saying, please?
Yes, it says save, build a little house, right? So it implies you should save and actually buy, build your little house. And so there is this culture, and there's this German dream, especially the post-World War dream of, you have the high growth phase where you work hard, you educate yourself, you educate your kids, and you have a house, you have a car, you have a good life, you retire, everything's fine.
And you drink beer and watch your football team win.
Oh no, that's Bavaria.
Well, the national team won 1954, 1974, 1990. I mean, 3 World Cups, actually 4. I was there when with a whole bunch of Germans when I believe it was Germany won in 2014, correct?
Yes.
It's a 4 World Cups. So.
But that's probably disconnected from the savings rate and beer consumption.
That probably is the one-time German spend.
Yeah. But German real estate professionals, they say the professional rents and doesn't buy. And that's because owning a house comes with costs and comes with stress, especially if you don't have the money on the side to do your maintenance. And I think that's a very good. There's very good reasons for that, especially in recent decades. There's been a development that's you have regulations that are just going overboard with everything. Also a great distinction between the Germans and the Dutch, by the way. But let's not get into that. But also, I think after the hyperinflation, there was a special tax because, of course, when you had a mortgage, you could pay it off like that, during the hyperinflationary phase. And so they had a special tax, and they increased. They had an appreciation of your mortgage. According to your house value and your remaining mortgage and so on and whatever have you, right? But that led to a decline of 50% in real estate value in Germany across the board, right? And of course, a share is a share. You can trade it; it's liquid. You buy it, you sell it whenever you want. And today it's even quicker. But a house is something that is
it's less liquid.
Reasons. Yeah, that's a good reason. It's called Immobilie in German. Yeah, it's called Immobilie in German because it's immobile. Yeah. And of course, that sticks with families, right? That gets passed on from family to family and so on. So that's an assumption, but I think it plays into it. And by the way, the hyperinflation in 1923, inflation is bad for notional values. So when you have bonds, you have savings accounts, you have liquid money, you have just cash money lying around. That all gets washed away with inflation, especially in the hyperinflation. Yeah. And the opposite effect for hard assets. So this should speak in favor of stock investing for Germans, but it doesn't. And I think the reason is security and no knowledge and education and traditional experience with traditional capital markets, because the Germans didn't have that. There was a little boom phase in around 1870s after the reparation payments from the French, and which is called the Gründerzeit, but that was thwarted very quickly, and I think more than 2 billion marks were destroyed in this phase. And then of course people didn't touch stock markets for a longer time anymore. So I think that the hyperinflation really drove Germans towards saving because of the yearning for security. And
it was traumatic. It was extremely traumatic, and in part that we read in our history books even to this day that the trauma of hyperinflation helped the Nazis rise to power. It had extraordinarily catastrophic political consequences, not only for Germany but also for all of Europe.
Yes. Of course, most certainly. But essentially, bottom line, the greatest currency in this world is trust, and money is nothing but trust. Money, paper money was originally an IOU. Everything's built on trust, and trust is security. And the Germans, I think they might think it's tantamount that equities aren't the opposite of trust. And if you get your money back, you have a notional value. You invest 100 euros, you get 100 euros back. That is trust. And I would like to add one more thing to that, and that is the big problem for Germans that they don't conceive is that they invest in government bonds, German government bonds in its various forms, believing that this is security, which is fine, but it's contradictory, because if you think this is security, you have to go one step underneath and you have to say, well, why is it security? It's because German taxpayers, German industry and German companies pay taxes. And if you don't trust these companies and the German taxpayers, why would you think the German government bonds are safe? It doesn't make sense at all, right? So why not invest in equities instead? Well, because of what volatility. And that's something the Germans have unfortunately not learned to endure because of the Deutsche Telekom stint on the capital markets. So you see, it's a whole ring of meerkats holding each other's tail. It just goes in circles, and one of them has to start going another way.
Well, Nicolai Leski, thank you for your time. I hope Germans start investing more in equity, especially in German equities. Maybe you'll start a fund, a German equities focused fund. And Donald Trump, Scott Bessent, and all the bigwigs in Washington, D.C., if you're listening, please take note of the point Mr. Leski, Herr Leski, made about trust. In God we trust, in the dollar we trust. So make sure that don't break that trust.
Yes, exactly.
On that note, Nicolai, wonderful having you. We'll have you back. Great discussion. Until next time. And those of you who've enjoyed this discussion, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you press the bell icon, then you'll be able to listen to more conversations like this. And go to the website, sign up for our newsletter. We publish interesting perspectives from intelligent people like Herr Leski from around the world. Thank you.
Atul, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.